Welcome to the new Kata Learning training module entitled Understanding the Direction or Challenge. For your reference, this material comes from Chapter 3 of the Toyota Kata book by Mike Rother. I want to make one very important point about Kata before we get into the specifics. Kata is all about routine and pattern. Just as the disciplines of the martial arts center on practice kata, or patterns of movement, Toyota Kata is centered on and depends on the improvement kata pattern. The pattern is a series of sequential steps that teach and prompt scientific thinking and acting. There are actually two kata involved. The improvement kata pattern with a learner exploring and experimenting step by step to improve a process, and the coaching kata in which a coach teaches and helps the learner through the improvement kata pattern. Each of the steps of the improvement kata build upon each other. That is why they should be taken sequentially. Starting from the bottom of this illustration, we start with understanding the direction. Just as a hiker starts off with a destination in mind to give purpose and direction to his journey, the kata learner starts off with his destination in mind. An overarching challenge provides that direction. The challenge is basically a description of what the organization or individual needs the process to look like at a given point in the future. That description includes characteristics as well as defining metrics. Moving up, we see that the learner spends time grasping the current condition. This contrasts greatly with the approach favored by most Western cultures. We tend to want to jump right into the fixing part without taking the time to really understand what is currently going on. This often results in wrong assumptions and misdirected efforts. The better the understanding that you develop of the current condition, the more precise your target condition will be. Next, you as a learner will define the next target condition. In this step, we ask you to step into the future and describe what the process will look like at the next point in time. Again, looking closely and describing the characteristics of what you see in your mind's eye about the process, the actions and behaviors and operating essentials will provide the things that you will need to work on changing as you experiment your way towards achieving that target condition. Of course, you'll also want to identify very specific metrics that express how the process is functioning. And finally, in our illustration, you will iterate towards the target condition. That is, one step at a time, experimentation, where you will identify daily experiments to conduct that are designed to eliminate the obstacles that stand between you and operating at your target condition. Not only are the improvement kata steps sequential, they also repeat periodically. An example, the initial kata lines that were launched at the Subiaco, Arkansas facilities experienced several times in which they moved back and forth through the IK steps as needed in their experimentation with the MIT processes. This is not uncommon due to the fact that learners are just what the title implies. They are learning as they go along, both about the kata pattern and scientific thinking, and about their targeted process. Right now, though, you are at the beginning, understanding the direction. At this step, you might ask yourself, what 1 to 3 year challenge are we striving to meet? You could answer that question by finishing the statement, wouldn't it be awesome if? You fill in the blank. Just so that you have an idea of where you are in relationship to the Kata Learner storyboard, you're working to develop the challenge statement that will appear in the upper right-hand corner of the board, marked with a red X in this illustration. Research and experience has shown that teams and organizations work better in response to an overarching challenge. That challenge is so important, so much so that Kotter, in his book Leading Change, says that effectively creating a sense of urgency through a crisis is important. That if one doesn't exist, find one and make that your focus. The challenge then should express a future state that is beyond what can be attained today and that is so important it screams for attention and focus. Here's a feeling that you will definitely experience as you kata your way in the near future. You will feel like that baby bird being kicked out of its nest for the first time, anxious and wondering if you can do this. You can and will. Kata itself is based on the fact that learners need to operate and experiment beyond what we call their threshold of knowledge, in that area of uncertainty where you don't quite know what will happen. But that's exactly why they call it experimenting. You're not supposed to know the outcome. You can guess and maybe even have a pretty good idea, but you won't know for sure. The good news is that you do experiments and reflect on what you learned from them. Your knowledge does increase and your comfort zone will expand as well. So what exactly is an overall or overarching challenge? It's a statement of a new condition that you envision. It's a pattern of performance, all about better serving the customer. It's something you can't get to or achieve doing things the same way you are right now. That's why it's called a challenge. You'll have to get there one step at a time. The good news is that you don't have to do it all overnight. You'll set incremental interim goals or target conditions, like waypoints on a journey. As you develop your challenge, don't let it become a judgment or a statement of how good or bad you are right now. It just needs to be how good you will be in the future. An interesting thing that researchers and practitioners have discovered is that far-reaching challenges way out there in the future just don't motivate and sustain change over the long term. The challenge is best served fresh, as they say, extending from 6 months to 3 years out. In our organization right now, they tend to be 6 months to 1 year. Just a note, the challenges of the various kata teams that we have operating within our organization all align with the respective plant goals or challenges. Those in turn align with the overall company vision. Now let's get to some specifics. How do we actually practice or develop that challenge? Here are 3 pretty important questions that you might consider as you develop your challenge. Number 1, what do you envision success to look like for your process at that point in time? Number 2, what capabilities do we want to develop that will allow us to be successful? And number 3, what changes in our environment at all levels threaten our current capabilities? In other words, what makes us special right now that might not be so unique in the future? Most of the time, you'll have drawn a current state value stream map or a process map as you prepared to develop your challenge. As you reflect on that current state map, use it to envision where you could be in the future. And even go a step beyond that to think of what you would want if all things were possible. Here are some examples of that kind of thinking. You might have heard the saying, everyone has their challenges. Some are just more visible than others. Well, in a kata-oriented organization, every process or organizational level also has an overarching challenge that they are trying to achieve. And in a cascading pattern, your challenge will most likely support and stem from the target condition of the next level above you. An example is a line in a manufacturing facility whose challenge supports the goals or target condition of the value stream or department to which it belongs. Let's take a moment to look at the rest of the improvement kata pattern. I used to be a scoutmaster. I would take my group of 12 to 14-year-old scouts out to the woods to teach them how to navigate using a map and a compass. Orienteering, as that was called, was definitely more than just handing them a compass and putting an X on a map where they needed to get to. There were very specific skills that I needed to teach them. In the same way, just issuing challenges to a kata team is not going to get them to where they need to be. People in the organization also need to master a systematic, scientific way of working towards those challenges. Learners are taught to establish intermediary target conditions as they move forward, one target condition at a time, each of which extends out for a couple of weeks, up to about 3 months out. So now you ask yourself, how do I actually get to that target condition that I have set? It's pretty simple actually. Well, not easy, but it is simple. Just experiment your way towards it. We call it an experiment, or a PDCA. The letters PDCA stand for plan, do, check, and act. You plan your experiment. You conduct or do your experiment. While you're doing, you collect data and analyze the results. Then, after reflection on the results, you make whatever adjustments or actions need to take place as a result. Key to this daily effort is to plan highly focused PDCAs that target specific obstacles that you feel are preventing you from operating at the target condition at that day, at that time. Here's a manufacturing example of how this all works. The XYZ company is developing a drying oven, as seen on the left, needed for one of their production lines. They're developing the oven because their vision is to have single piece or one-by-one flow through the process, and their current oven is a batch process. So they've established a challenge theme of paint in line, meaning no more taking parts offline to a separate batch paint line. They're currently iterating towards the target condition of having the oven component of the system developed and tested. But there's a major obstacle that stands between them and achieving their target condition. It is that the chain conveyor that carries the components through the oven keeps derailing when parts are hung on it. It does fine when it's operating empty, so the team is now conducting PDCAs, or experiments, to determine why it derails and to identify and test ways to prevent the derailing issues. An interesting way to think about the relationship of the current condition, target condition, challenge, and vision is to see them as sequential steps along an upward climbing staircase. Daily or frequent PDCAs move us upwards from the current condition towards and eventually attaining the target condition. Through our experimentation, we eliminate the obstacles that are directly in our way. When we reach a target condition, we immediately reassess the now current condition, hopefully which is slightly different from the previous one, and set our next target condition. Each successive target condition should be getting us closer and closer to achieving the challenge. Target conditions are set long enough to be achievable but short enough to ensure that motivation stays high. Note that the specific element details progress from very specific on the PDCA level to more general on the vision level. One of the most common sites in traditional continuous improvement efforts is for a team to generate a whole list of things to fix or action items that are related to a specific issue being addressed. But as time goes on, even in the face of a ton of work, the needle doesn't seem to be moving for the key indicators or the metrics of significance that track how that process is performing. A similar scenario is that the team again generates huge lists of countermeasures, and progress does seem to be made, but it tapers off and eventually declines when constant attention moves elsewhere. The improvement kata and coaching kata patterns address both scenarios. This illustration explains why. First, let's explain what the key elements of the illustration represent and how they interact. The large gray oval in the center of the illustration represents the learner's learning zone. That is the area in which he or she does not understand everything about the process or issues associated with the challenge. You'll notice that the next target condition, which is represented by the small circle, is at the right end of the learning zone on the end towards the challenge, which means that it is closer. On the opposite side, still within the learning zone, is a red X, which represents where the learner currently is. As you can see, there's a gap of some size between the two. The ragged red line surrounding the X represents the learner's threshold of knowledge. The threshold of knowledge expresses the limits of what knowledge and skills that the learner has and has brought with him or her to the kata team experience. It embodies a wide variety of skills and knowledge, including what the learner knows about the target process that he's working with, how it works, its variables and outcomes, as well as his or her knowledge and skills in problem-solving the issues at hand. You'll also notice that there are two green parallel zigzag lines representing a path that runs between the learner's present position, which is the red X, and the next target condition, that little circle. It's not by accident that the path has not been represented as straight. And finally, we see a bunch of dots spread all over, surrounding the learner's position. These dots represent the whole array of problems and issues that exist in association with the target condition. Some are a ways from it, some closer. But of significance, there are some that are directly between the learner's present position and the next target condition. They are in fact blocking the learner's path towards it. We express these dots as those obstacles that are currently preventing the learner or the operators from functioning at the target condition. It's important to understand that only a few of the identifiable obstacles are actually blocking the path to the target condition. All the rest may seem important, but they are not actually preventing progress towards that target condition. Please also note that some of the obstacles are closer to the learner. He should address them sequentially as he works his way along the path towards the target condition, much like one steps around or steps over obstacles on a path as we take a hike. And the learner works his way towards the target condition through PDCAs or experiments that eliminate each obstacle, allowing him to move incrementally forward. Eventually, through iterative and sequential PDCAs, the learner will have moved along the path, eliminating the obstacles and drawing close enough to attain the next target condition, as you see in this illustration. From the checks above, you can see some important points. As the learner moves forward, the performance of the process improves, as indicated by the key metrics. Second, the learner is getting closer to the challenge. Third, his or her threshold of knowledge is expanding as he or she learns from all of the experimentation. And finally, through repeated use and practice, his or her skill level with the kata itself has increased. All of this adds up to a powerful feature of the improvement kata, that learning and growth are inseparable from continuous improvement through kata. As the saying goes, rinse and repeat. Each time the learner reaches the next target condition, he or she sets another next target condition, and off he goes until the challenge is attained. Here are two examples from the Subiaco, Arkansas facility of challenge themes. Take a few minutes to look them over. You will notice that there were significant gains accomplished with both teams. All of this seems a little daunting when you first start out, perhaps more than you can accomplish. It has been proven over and over that significant achievements are possible using the improvement and coaching kata, much more than the participants thought possible when they started on the journey. Michelangelo said, "The greater danger for most of us lies not in setting our aim too high and falling short, but in setting our aim too low and achieving our mark." Our challenge to you as you contemplate setting your next challenge is, set your mark high enough to give yourself not only a slightly queasy stomach, but also to give yourself room to stretch. You've completed the new Kata Learner training module entitled Understanding the Direction and Challenge. If you have further questions, please feel free to consult with your coach or second coach.